Hey kids, howdy and welcome to the New Year's edition of Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. We are coming at you for December 29th through January 4th. So in
Happy
fact,
New Year.
yeah, Happy New Year, everybody. And listen, if you're listening to this anytime before New Year's Day, it's still time to get your seats for my astro overview for the year, which will be done live New Year's Day at 10 a.m. I could usually crank it out in about 2.5 hours. You don't have to stay. You don't have to listen live. The recording will be available. I did like 8 comprehensive handouts, so you got lots of
Oh,
support for the year to come in terms of dates and movement. And I love the tradition of doing this on New Year's Day. This is like the 6th year I've done it this way, and it just for me personally, it's just a lovely way for me to start my New Year's Day. So I'm very excited for that. Just head over to michaellennox.com and grab your seat.
I have a question about this, about your year in review. So, like everyone else, I'm kind of just curious, like, how does it apply to me? I
Yeah,
mean,
well, yeah.
yes, I am interested in what the year has to bring in general, and also, you know how based on where your signs are or where your planets are, movement means something different.
Yeah. Yep.
If I'm interested in the year in review, but it feels kind of overwhelming, how can I like watch your video or do the worksheets and understand like how it applies to me?
Great question. Because this is one of the challenges that I have as what I like to call a real astrologer, as opposed to the pop astrologers out there who will present the astrology as here's how it applies to you and do this for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising. I can't do that. It's not a matter of like, does that work? Is that accurate? Will people get value out of it? Maybe, but in my mouth, I can't do that because it's not like real astrology. And so the challenge is many people who find my teaching valuable or, clear, I am speaking the language of 100% astrology, which is difficult to convey personally when I'm talking about the big general picture. And the idea that anybody's going to receive the year's energy as a function of what their sun sign is, that just doesn't exist in astrology.
Oh, really?
Not really. This is the example I give all the time. I'm sure I've said this even recently. When Pluto was moving into Aquarius, the pop astrologers were talking about how the fixed sun signs were going to be blown away by it. That's Leo, Taurus, Scorpio, and Aquarius. I'm a Leo sun and a Leo Venus, which means it is going to indeed, Pluto's going to blow my life open in 20 years. So you could say Pluto moving in, do this for your sun, moon, and rising, but like it's not going to be exact for everybody at the same time. Now, that said, there are ways to more sort of simply take advantage of some of the astrological information, even if you don't know a whole lot about astrology. First of all, your chart has 12 houses in it. Each house is ruled by a different sign based on your birth. Each house has different sort of reflections of areas of your life, right? You start out with reflections of self. The third through sixth signs is about how you relate to your environment. 7 through 10, or 7, 8, 9 is, how you relate to the outside world in bigger ways. And then 10, 11, 12 is how you relate to the world institutionally and the big, large consciousnesses. That's very simple to understand without having to like take a course. If you just looked at it like a diagram, you could literally sit in the astro overview with your chart and then maybe a copy of, you taking notes about which house means what and notably what sign
Hmm.
rules each house, because there's going to be big, deep transformations in the Aquarius world. And so rather than be like fixed signs, your sun will be hit by this, I would say, what house is your Aquarius house in your chart?
Yeah,
Because then you know, oh, that's where the deep change will take place.
sure.
Uranus is the fast change, unstable, anything can happen and probably will. So you're going to look to your Gemini house to see where and how what I talk about might impact you in terms of fast and sudden changes. Neptune and Saturn are moving into Aries. So you look at the Aries house of your chart and know that everything I say about the great teacher Saturn and Neptune will impact that house. Now, before I became sort of chronically ill, I was the absent-minded professor and I can barely remember anything. But now it's like a skill. So I don't remember what year this was, but there was a year, and maybe this was even 2020, because the thrust of the big energy in 2020 was 22 degrees of Capricorn, because that's where Pluto and Saturn and Jupiter were in January. I could give a, air quotes, horoscope for every sign based on how the sign related to Capricorn.
Hmm.
But we don't have that now. We don't have a myopic single focus. That's why I mentioned the three pillars of all of the change this year and next year are these planets. And I'm going to be talking all about how they relate to each other and how the other planets relate to them. So even just that, coming to the forecast, identifying what house is ruled by each of those signs, Aquarius, Gemini, and Aries. Ask a friend if you don't, if you can't figure that out on your own. That's your best way, this year at any rate, of taking in the information that I'm presenting and distill it into something that can make sense for you. I want to make one little last point before we go on. Aquarius, deep, slow change. Gemini, fast, sudden change. Aries, spiritual inspiration and marching orders. Those signs were active this year,
Hmm.
right? So while you're identifying those houses in your chart for 2026, understand that you can look at 2025 and those same houses should reflect things that you recognize as, oh, yeah, that was so. So last year, we'll give you lots of information about how to sit in the forecast about next year. It's a fairly quiet week in a way. We've got a big full moon on Saturday. The day before that on Friday, Chiron goes direct, but I don't think that's a very big deal, but it's a thing I'm talking about these years. So one of the things I decided to do today was just give you guys the general forecast for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Ooh,
Like most
preview.
people are going to be doing things. I'll be in bed by 6:30 or 7 as I am every night. But most of y'all will be some version of activity and out and aboutness. So I figured it's a good way to start the podcast in preparation for the big celebrations. First and foremost, I love that the moon is going to be in Gemini for both days. No void, just in Gemini from I guess the night of the 30th. So we have the chatty, social connection. Let's get together and have some fun because that's what Gemini is, right? It's not extravagance. It's not over the top stuff. It's just when Gemini is ruling whatever moment, people want to connect and talk and share their ideas. So, at a time when there's so much dicey shit happening out there in the world, and I'm sure there are people who are curious about what friction might show up on New Year's Eve, I would say the Gemini moon is like the perfect moon sign to do both things of keep things light and breezy and connecty without inspiring lugubrious, stuff as if if it's like the Scorpio moon or something like that. So good moon sign for fun. Now, connections and gatherings always have to connect to the nodes of the moon. Now, the nodes of the moon up in the cosmos, besides creating the eclipses, which impact all of us at the same time and in the same way, the collective, when any personal planet or luminary touches the nodes in a harmonious way, the consciousness of whatever the transiting planet is will sort of talk about what the gatherings might be about, but the positive geometry, if that's what's going on, which it is, means that collective gatherings have a level of grace and ease about them because that sense of the nodes of the collective, and so something touching the collective supportingly generates ease and grace. And I think we have like a perfect setup for this because on New Year's Day, the sun will sextile the north node and trine the south node. I love this because the north node is about where we're going next. The north node is 2026. The south node is 2025.
Uh-huh.
So I love that the sun is trining the south node because that's like thank fucking God that year's over. Because trines mean easy. So we have an easy release of the year behind. And the sextile means we got to put in a little effort and work. But that's just the effort and work of sun consciousness, meaning gathering in a like-minded way, right? Conscious awareness of the sun touching the nodes means everybody's thinking about the same thing at the same time. So on December 31st, it's the sun lighting up the idea that we have a collective experience, and then the Gemini moon does its thing to say, well, then let's get together and talk about it. And then the very next day, Venus does the exact same thing. So while we're in the New Year's Day experience, whether that's recovering from the 31st or if, like me, I honor January 1st as the new year, whereas the New Year's Eve never meant anything to me, even before I lived the way I do now. But Venus doing it second is restorative, right? The sun lights it all up. I like that for New Year's Eve. And Venus says, rest, come back to your heart and love, and let the hope for 2026 be in your embodiment on January 1st. And Venus sextiling the north node and trining the south absolutely can offer that. Now, would that were all. Because it's not, there's a but or an and, let's call it an and there is energy that will match the kind of friction and conflict you might expect in a New Year's Eve. It's Mars sesquisquaring Uranus. In my notes for today, I wrote, watch out in all caps. Part of why this is because, as I'm thinking about it and writing this outline and talking about it, my time zone shows this very abrasive friction of sudden things happening that include movement and aggression and potentially anger and reactivity right before midnight. Now, it's perhaps the most
Fun.
yeah, perfect. But really the friction of the fun, right? It's not soft fun. It's edgy fun. It's drinking fun. It's crowds in New York City, Times Square fun. So the reason why I'm talking about those possibilities, because this friction matches that and doesn't have to be something bigger. Do you know what I mean? Have you ever been to Times Square on New Year's Eve?
No, definitely not. I've been to Times Square, not for New Year's
Horrifying.
Eve. I would never.
Right. So this is an important astrological lesson where I tell you guys that in the sort of evening hours, there's this very abrasive friction of anything can happen and probably will. Don't add to that, like, well, I'm going to a party and therefore it's going to be terrible. The party is the reflection of the friction. So while I said watch out in my outline because it made me laugh, that right near midnight, there's, the anything can happen and probably will energy. And just let that make sense because it's New Year's Eve. Mercury is playing a little bit of a game of, A, B, 1, 2, right? He's leaving Sagittarius during New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, or getting ready to. So on New Year's Eve at like 28 degrees of Sag, he'll inconjunct Uranus at 28 Taurus. So that means on New Year's Day, there's the sudden track change energy. That might be changes of plans. That might be, I don't know, abandonment of decorum in order to have the experience of Uranian freedom and rebellion, right? It could be a very fun aspect, even though it's kind of stressful. The inconjunct, we call it the great eliminator, but it's also like a seesaw, right? So this energy on New Year's Eve, the 31st, is exciting and dynamic where, again, anything can happen and probably will. That sort of doubles down on the New Year's Eve potential instability that, again, I'm reminding you to just take in as that's what New Year's Eve is like. And then the next day, while Venus is sort of saying, sit back and rest into what you're imagining for the year ahead, Mercury's going to square Neptune. And so that's going to make the idea of the year ahead a source of confusion on New Year's Day. That's why you should spend New Year's Eve morning with me. Or New Year's Day morning. But it is an interesting fact of that our mind is sort of at play on New Year's Eve, but when we move into New Year's Day, we have to push through well, I don't know what I'm going to do, and that's scary. Don't let it be. Let it be, I don't know yet. That's a very big theme for Sunday. I don't know yet. And then, of course, Gemini will move into Capricorn on the 2nd. And the last thing I'm going to say is, again, about close to the turning of the year moment on the 31st. The Gemini moon that's keeping us sort of chatty and social will square the nodes of the moon and inconjunct Venus and the sun. The square to the nodes is a bumpy gathering. Remember, the nodes are about the collective. Anyone touching the nodes colors how the collective is gathering. And while we're crossing over the sort of late night, near midnight Pacific time, there's a little bit of bumpiness in your gatherings. Again, perfect for a boisterous New Year's Eve. I can't speak to what that will feel like if you're like hanging out by yourself. It's a bit of friction if you are, but it might also be standard for the turn of the year. The inconjunct to Venus and the sun just means that right around the big moment, at least here in the West, we're probably getting more and more excited. So again, I can point to this that on another day I might say, oh, track changes, sudden needs to be, to change your plans. This will be the juicy celebrations getting sort of bigger and louder as we get towards midnight, certainly in the West, but for everybody in a general way. I think this New Year's Eve astrology is perfect for the person who wants to party.
Oh.
Absolutely. No, all of this like stress and friction that I talked about, if you put it in the context of a big celebration that's collective and worldwide, it's the perfect energy for like, let's get fucking drunk and tear it up in a delightful, fun way.
Okay.
Gemini moon. The only thing I can't speak to is the people who are going to want a quieter New Year's passage are still dealing with this same friction, but somehow softer and more personal. Either way, we're gonna be fine. And the turn of the year is a beautiful sort of moment of reset. Focus on that. On Friday, January 2nd, Chiron goes direct at 22 degrees of Aries. The reason why I'm mentioning this station when typically I don't talk about when planets out there, the outers and the social and outers change direction, I'm doing it this year because it impacts so many things in terms of the waves of energy in 25 and 26. And one of the big challenges, opportunities that we've been in since October is the square between Chiron and Jupiter. Chiron clears out the inner gunk of how we, operate here, which means we get more, accustomed to, we're not accustomed to, but we get better at using the magic. And Jupiter's how we manifest. So if they're bumping up in a square, the opportunity is to sort of let go of some resistance, whether it's wounds or unbelief or something that keeps you from trusting your capacity to create something magnificent. There's no such thing as a bad Jupiter transit. That's why it's an opportunity, but it can be painful depending on how much wound you're carrying around. This was exact with the new moon in October that kicked off 2 lunar cycles of shadow work, and now we're in the sort of wrap up lunar cycle. They'll hit and be exact in January and then again in July of next year. And that's going to make July 4th an interesting weekend. But Chiron turning direct takes anything that was happening in the last couple of months in the world of healing internally. By Chiron going direct, it's like externalizes the things that helped us shift in the area of wounds. And we're not done with the process of this sort of what do you have to let go of in terms of resistance, wounded consciousness, or unbelief that is very big next year because of the hit in January and July. But this is a moment where, as we're crossing the threshold of the new year, Chiron turning direct, I think, lets us walk a little bit freer of wound than, say, the last 3 months. Every polarity in the zodiac sort of carries a special dynamic. We have to experience as, opposites we've got to work with to sort of create a transcendent third. Right. The artist has to meet the canvas before the painting can be created. The Cancer Capricorn trajectory has a lot of richness that you can't really say that one is more important than another, but the angular signs have a kind of weight that the other signs don't have, meaning the cardinal signs where the seasons begin are the angular signs. If you're looking at the natural wheel of the zodiac, every wheel has a line that goes across it. That's the relational axis. And then a line that goes up and down. We call that the foundational axis. The rising sign and the descendant is about how you relate. And the foundational axis has Cancer rooting you to home, to care, to restoration, to containment, to memory, all of the yummy, nurturing, mothering of Cancer holds a dynamic and profound opposite of the father consciousness of Saturn-ruled Capricorn, where we're all in doing. What's the goal? Where's the form? Show me the mountain. I'm already climbing. These two signs, because they're opposite each other, can't be disconnected in consciousness. And so there's a transcendent third that gets created when mother and father come together, and that's child. So when you're talking about Cancer and Capricorn, it really is about the mothering in you and the fathering in you coming into some sort of balance where the transcendent third is me in a body knowing how to frickin' do both. I can climb the mountain of my ambitions with every bit of like myopic focus that I can muster, but I can only do that to the extent that I am willing to create rest, care, restoration, and the ability to stop moving in the doing consciousness and land in the being consciousness. So, in spirit of the Capricorn side of this dynamic where the sun is, it ain't just that we're consciously aware of ambitions and goals and the new year desires to make some things happen in 2026. All of the personal planets are there. In fact, Mars and Venus flank the sun exactly. The degree point of the full moon is 13. So you got a 13-degree Capricorn sun, 12-degree Mars, 14-degree Venus. That means embodiment, what we want to accomplish, emotional body of like satisfaction and joy that comes from, feeling great about what your life is, helping you accomplish. That's Venus in Capricorn. Mercury's not so close to be conjunct, but at 2 degrees of Capricorn, the mind is also aware of what do I want to do? Do. A lot of do in the Capricorn mansion. The reason why I'm sort of emphasizing this is I want you guys to really get that the scales appear to be tipped in the direction of the doing and the accomplishment piece. Save that for the new moon in Capricorn 2 weeks later, because that's when you want to be thinking about doing. This is a full moon release moment. So all of that embodied, heartfelt, mentally contained doing wants to be not gotten rid of, but shifted in this way that full moons do. So the moon is always where the juice is in a full moon, because it's not called a full sun, it's called a full moon. And the moon is our arbiter to unconscious material. So what's powerful about a full moon is unconscious release. So we always turn towards where the moon is for what's being operated on. In the idea that most people fall into like one side or the other of things of this nature, you might be someone who's, sitting on the couch too much because you're afraid to climb the mountain and it's safer to not. That has to go. If you're the person who can't stop moving, this might be the full moon where your body just says, stop. I'm kidding. No one's going to flatten out from this a full moon per se. But that's sort of like the other side of the Cancer continuum of Cancer energy being out of balance. So all of us fit somewhere on that continuum, and sometimes on both sides, depending on what area of your life you're in consideration of. So in a general way, the moon is just asking us to let go of anything about home, care, memory, and the ways you sort of make your life a safe place to be. What makes me as an astrologer say words like, and this is what I'll use this word specifically when something like this happens, I'll call it elegant. To me, there's something very elegant about the fact that Jupiter, the planet of manifestation, is in Cancer. So the Capricorn consciousness has the ambition, but it can't be expansive unless Jupiter is sort of participating. Right? Saturn in Capricorn is just like focus. You need Jupiter's sort of largesse and expansiveness and hope and possibility and co-creation energy to create real magnificence. So it's elegant to me that all the personal planets are saying, I got to do something, I got to do something, I got to do something. And not only is the moon saying, no, 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 focus on the self-care, Cancer stuff you got to let go of at this moment. Jupiter's like literally there saying, I'm not letting you guys manifest fucking anything until you do this work. And he's not over there in Capricorn. He's holding the tensions of opposites. Because it's a full moon, the moon has way more power than Jupiter in this, but the message is clear. You don't get to expand into magnificence unless you do something to bring in more balance between your beingness and your doingness. And in my world, that sort of looks like calling your devotion a connection to Mother, Father, God, with us in bodies as the transcendent third of that. This full moon says treat your body differently to make sure you're prepared to climb the mighty mountains that we will have to next year. And when we get to the new moon in 2 weeks, everybody's at like the same degree in Capricorn. That's an elegant new moon. But first, we have this work to do. There's some extra juice in the full moon just because there's so many of the planets are in yummy, lovely places. Right? The moon and Neptune are both in their ruling sign. Mars and Jupiter are both in signs we call exalted or their exaltation. Jupiter has like an extra thing called accidental dignity because he's so close to the moon at the full moon moment that's what accidental dignity is. When a planet is near the moon or an angle, it's called accidentally dignified. So my language for this is whatever the process you might be in that's emotional and release oriented is going to work more effectively because the players are operating at their best, or at least many of the players are operating at their best. That counts. And if you look at the geometry of the full moon, there's a couple of patterns that are sort of expressed in it, but there's a beautiful, and forgive the overuse of the word, elegant, mystic rectangle, which is just 4 points or planets or, a bunch of them in different corners, creating a rectangular shape that's 2 sextiles and 2 trines. Blah, 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 blah. Astro speak for really well working energies together that something mystical can occur because you've got the sextiles of potential and the trines of ease, and the moon and Jupiter is one end. Venus, the sun, and Mars are the opposite corners, and the other corners are the nodes of the moon, the collective experience. I'm kind of making this up. But it's no secret that I have an agenda. I want everybody to be living a more devotional life, putting their spiritual practice front and center, because when you do that, when you prioritize that, everything else works out better because you're living in that kind of a centered consciousness. My theory is that when enough people on the planet are doing this, we can have the outward projection of more peace, but there isn't enough sort of embodied people holding that consciousness to be seen in the outside world. This mystic rectangle kind of tells that story in a way. Because all the personal planets are in the one opposition saying, in your body, let some shit go so you can feel like you are more whole, complete, and able to be in that body successfully. And then the other opposition creating the mystic rectangle is the collective past and the collective future. This full moon is personal, deeply personal, but I want you to think of everything as impacting the collective, because part of the message of 2026, especially when the nodes change signs in the middle of the year, is it's all about finding how we serve at the individual level and then offer that to the world because the world needs it or we ain't gonna make it, kids.
Did you know that Michael has a daily astro alert? If you enjoy hearing the weekly astrology, you might like knowing more about each day. When you subscribe for the daily astro alerts, you'll get an in-depth explanation of the day's astrology sent right to your email. Subscriptions are only $10 a month, or you can purchase the yearly subscription at the reduced price of $100. To subscribe, head over to michaellennox.com. All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show.
This week we have an email in dream from Knox.
That's a fascinating name. I love it.
That's a great name. They say, "Dear Dr. Michael Lennox, aka Red Robe," with an emoji. I just thought that was funny.
Yay.
They're emailing in from Portland, Oregon, and the theme in the dream is going to the hot springs.
Oh, they identified a theme.
So Knox says, "I had a dream last night about going to a hot spring. In my waking life, I frequently travel to hot springs. I don't think I've ever had a dream about one. In my dream, I visited the hot springs twice. The first time, I visited the facility by myself. I recall checking in at the front desk where a nice man was working. I made sure to get there a couple hours before it closed. Changed into my bathing suit, had a nice soak, had pleasant conversations with the other guests, left before close and went to get food. Everything went smoothly. What is odd is that throughout the dream, I remember checking the time often because I was worried about being respectful of the hours of the hot spring. Next, things got strange. I invited my best friend and her baby girl along with me to go back to the hot spring. She currently has one baby and is in the 3rd trimester pregnancy with another one. She was not pregnant in the dream. This visit was rockier. I remember on the way to the spring checking the time and realized we were pushing it. The spring would close in 2 hours. We drove through the mountains on windy roads and made it an hour before close. I'm not sure how, but my late grandmother, mother, and other best friend were also there. It's almost like we all came together. My friend with the baby was not concerned about being on time, and I was concerned about getting everyone into the hot spring before close because I had been there before and the others hadn't, so I felt I had to put their needs before my own. They all took their sweet time getting ready, and at this point, I was checking my watch more frequently, feeling the pressure of the time limits weighing down on me.
Wow.
The nice man at the front desk seemed not to care about the time. As the minute of closing dawned on us, and after going back and forth to help my friend, her baby, and my mom and grandma find the locker room, getting them into the spring, going back for towels they forgot, and finally getting everyone into the pool, we had 1 minute before close. I was so stressed. I remember looking around to see if the staff would come to tell us to leave. I felt defeated. However, without communication, I noticed the nice staff members watching us shuffle to get into the springs last minute. They didn't say anything and let us soak for an hour or more after close. I was very grateful, and in the end, everything worked out. I rarely have dreams with my late grandmother in them, She was an extremely grounding presence throughout this experience. She had no worry about time and didn't need much assistance getting into the spring. I felt she was truly there for me. I would love to hear your take on this, and thank you for doing all that you do. A fellow Leo and avid listener.
Well, this is this is a dream about control.
I was thinking it's about people pleasing.
Well, people pleasing and control are not dissimilar. When we people please, we are attempting to control something outside of us
Yes.
by inauthentically behaving with the agenda of peacekeeping,
Yeah.
but at such a cost that even if you're successful at getting, your, desired energy to be what's up, it's ultimately, not clean. It doesn't come out of sort of an authentic. I'm not talking about you, Knox, by the way. I'm talking about people pleasing and control. Right. So I love, in fact, Zoe, that you brought up the idea of people pleasing and that I could then say, yes, they're the same thing. So one of the things that I notice in a overall way is the time checking, right? Constant time checking, and nobody else cares about the time but you, Knox.
Yeah.
So that tells us that the consciousness of what time is it has to be something that's not serving. I mean, it's obvious in the dream that it's not serving, but in terms of like my leaning into it, it has to be not serving because the other people in the dream aren't small, innocuous aspects of self for Knox. They're big, they're significant. Family members, a best friend, the nice man at the desk who's going to play a very important role in a minute. So if all of those aspects of Knox are coming, including the grandmother, who's the most grounding in sort of ancestry, like if she ain't concerned about the time, then the message is time is irrelevant and the pressure is irrelevant. Why? Because everything worked out. She said that twice.
Yeah.
So the end of the day, all of the looking at the time did not matter for the reason she was looking at the time because it all worked out. So that doubles down that this is a dream about struggling, with the stress of things not going as fast as you want or other people not, blah, blah, blah. I also love, I have to say this every time, we do not talk about what dream. And this so fits the Cancer Capricorn full moon because the hot springs are about restoration, care. That's, I think, why the second visit had lots of images of care, mother, grandmother, a mother herself with a child and another one on the way. Very fertile, feminine care is everything that's present. And in the beingness of that, nobody gives a shit what time it is. So even though Knox isn't talking about like the Capricorn sensibility of like the mountains she's climbing in between these visits to the hot springs, its absence says, oh, the opposite here is Knox in her doing is functioning, however it is, we're going to assume fabulously, but her relationship to letting go of control and doing is really challenged. The nice man working, then, is the masculine gateway between doing and the beingness that's behind his desk when you go through those doors to the water. He's nice. That means to me the balance between masculine and feminine in Knox is not unnice. You know what I mean? It's like it's there's grace as represented by that figure. But even he doesn't give a shit what time it is. And he's the bouncer, he's the gateway, right? So he has a really important role in what I would call the ipso facto of the dream, that if the dream is about this space and he's the access to the space, then he counts. So his niceness counts, and his disinterest in the time also counts. If Knox were here, I would be asking her, what's her friend's relationship to doing versus being? It's interesting that she's a mom and about to be a double mom. That's a lot of doing in a being sort of consciousness. Mother creates being in a care of home. And so this woman, again, I don't know more about her in terms of like how she might also be reflecting Knox. She's certainly reflecting the part of Knox that does know I can create new things better when I'm in rest, when I'm in gestation rather than action. Now, I know the friend's not pregnant in the dream, she's pregnant in waking life, but that's the beautiful way that things sort of bleed in, right? Knox created that her friend representing new things in the child that she has made isn't in the dream gestating something new. Like Knox has removed that detail, right? It's a detail of preparation for something new that's not yet born. But she ain't pregnant in the dream. So I'll call that an effort to sort of eradicate more comfort with the rest and restoration consciousness. So I'll finish up with what Knox told us was the most important aspect of the dream for her, which was the presence of her grandmother, who doesn't show up often in her dreams, but in waking life was a source of care and wisdom. I'm going to guess that grandmother was more caring than taskmaster, that she made soup rather than, swords. So a generational ancestral connection to care, rest, and preparation is not worried about time, and neither should Knox be worried about time. Everything works out in the end.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.